What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another 60 feet 6 inches, your fantasy baseball home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You can follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me today, once again, it's Ben Rolfe. What's up, Ben?
Not much, Kyle. Been a bit of a quiet weekend for me. The combine doesn't really do it for me. I don't really understand all the hype that goes around it. So I've had a bit of a quiet weekend sports wise. So looking forward to chatting some baseball. Just working my way through a couple of drafts now and winding them up before getting into the sort of live draft, which I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, I've been all up in that combine. It's a lot of fun. It's good to see some of the prospects run and do some different drills. You don't want to go too crazy and get really excited about a player or down on a player just because of one event, but it definitely gives you some good insight into kind of the speed testing and kind of where they fit among other prospects, and it does definitely have legs. Some of the guys are making some really impressive stuff going. So, I'm always in with the fantasy football stuff. So, got rookie drafts coming up. So, starting to put my board together there and watching college basketball and all that stuff. But like you mentioned, we're here to talk some baseball. And if you're watching us on YouTube, thanks for hanging out. Make sure you are subscribed to this feed. Make sure you're checking out all of our position previews. Damian Dabrowski and I did catcher. Ben and I have been pounding through all the other positions. If you're listening on iTunes or Stitcher, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. It really does do a lot for us. And for those interested in listening on Google Play, we should be active on there very, very soon if we're not already. So if you use Google Play for your podcasts, definitely check us out there. Subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. But Ben, today we're going to talk outfield. There's a lot to get into. Obviously, there's hundreds and hundreds of names. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to talk top 20, 25 type guys. And then we'll come back with a second episode and kind of talk the rest of the guys and some of our favorites that are down deeper and all that good stuff. But Ben, I guess for you, we assume Trout's one. Who is number 2 outfielder on your board?
I have Charlie Blackmon. I just like the varied kind of skill set that he offers. He does a little bit of everything, and he's a bit older than the other guys now. Like when you think Bryce Harper and Mookie Betts, sort of the other guys in and around there, but he offers a lot. He hits in Colorado. Their team is getting better. Every year we hear they're going to trade him. They never do. He scores a ton of runs. He steals 20 bases and he can hit 20 home runs. Like he's just a great all-round guy to start off with. He's what we've always talked about between balancing your 5 categories. And I think he does that probably better than anybody in the top 5 not named Trout.
Yeah, and that's why I have him number 2 as well. We got to stop this agreeing thing. It's not good for our show. It's not good for us. It's going to make drafts really, really frustrating. But, yeah, no, I'm with you. He does so much. He hits, he runs, he steals, plays in a great ballpark, hits in a good lineup. I'm all in on Mr. Charlie Blackmon. Let's talk about some of the power guys kind of hanging out around the top 5, mainly Giancarlo, Stanton, Aaron Judge, and JD Martinez. And I know we've talked a lot about these guys just because of free agency and all these different things, but are these guys surefire top 5 locks like we kind of have penciled in, or should us drafters be a little more pessimistic and maybe proceed with caution, especially when it comes to Martinez and Stanton, who are 2 guys who have trouble playing 140, 150 games every year?
Yeah, all 3 of them have had their injury woes. Now, it's hard with Stanton because some of his injury woes come down to bad luck. Like you remember the fastball in the face. That you can't hold that against him for injury prone. But he's not the safest kind of guy in those terms. I do find it interesting that Bryce Harper and Giancarlo Stanton are both ahead of Charlie Blackmon currently on ESPN's ADP. Like, I can see why that temptation to go for that the 35 to 40 home runs might be there, but it's an interesting one, definitely. It's a big playoff. I have JD Martinez in my top 5. I actually have him over Mookie Betts because I think with JD Martinez being the DH and at worst the first baseman in Boston, I think he's going to play a ton. And I know there's worry about the fact that it is a big field out to the right hand side as you look at it from the batter's box, and you've got the green monster over to the left hand side, and he's a line drive kind of hitter. But I think these guys adjust to that. I really do. I think it's not as if they've got a replica green monster that he's going to get to practice on in spring training. I think he'll be absolutely fine. I think he's going to hit for a really good average. I think he's going to score a ton of runs and drive in a ton of runs. And that's where he kind of stands out over Betts at the moment. If Betts moves down in the order, he's currently, I believe, slated to hit either 1 or 2. If he moves down into the 3 hole and they find a way to maybe move Nunez up to 1 and Benintendi into 2, then I like Betts more. Betts will move above, but at the moment, the RBI is a limit for me for Betts, and that's what kind of drops him down to the back end of that top 6 for me.
Yeah, I guess my pushback would be if we're, at least for me, I noticed last year that steals were really hard, especially elite steals guys were super valuable. Power was a lot more in surplus, and maybe, we should kind of fall in between of last year and this year and expect, maybe steals are a little bit easier, maybe power is a little harder to find and not get too aggressive. But guys like Mookie Betts and Charlie Blackmon are a lot more interesting for me just because of the steals they can provide. And I know we expect Betts to hit a little bit lower, but I still think 35 steals is very much in the realm of possibilities. And when I'm looking at Mookie Betts, who I trust to play more games, trust to provide the steals, and, if he can get his average back up kind of where we expect it to be, closer to, 280, 290 at least, I don't know. I feel like that's going to be the more valuable player at come season's end.
Yeah, I don't. It's very hard to know what to do with Mookie Betts, really, because we've seen a bit of everything from him. We've seen the sort of we've seen anything range from 18 to 31 home runs. What we do know is that there's going to be 20 to 25 steals. He's had 21, 26, and 26, but the average has fluctuated from 291 in his first 2 years down to 318 and then 264 in last year. So he's a real interesting guy, and I mean he's only 25, so he's gonna bounce back. It just comes down to those runs and RBI for me. But the counter argument to what I'm saying would be that at times he batted higher in the lineup last year than that, and he still managed to put up a combined 200 runs and RBI. So it's going to be tough. I think those two are going to be very interchangeable at that 5-6 spot. I'd probably rather go for. I think if Harper was the one that stayed fit all year, Harper would undeniably be the second best outfielder in baseball. I really do, because I just think the combined effort that he puts up is so much better than all these other guys, and the talent is just there. Yeah. So he'd be right up there with Blackmon for me. So just for upside, I'm always going to rank him 3. Home runs are plentiful, but Stanton and his 50 home run power is what gets him above the 2 Boston Red Sox guys for me. And then like I say, I could take Martinez and Betts either way, whichever way you want. But what I would say is that Martinez is going 15, 16 picks later than Betts. So yeah. I'd much rather have Martinez for his price at the back end of the second round in a 12-team league than I would pay first half of the first round for Betts.
Yeah, and I honestly I don't hate his start. I know outfield is deeper. It depends on if you're playing in 3 or 5. But if you start Mookie Betts and JD Martinez, I think you'll be really happy with kind of the direction your team is heading in. I do think it's funny that, a year ago we were all worried about Bryce Harper and debating whether he was a first rounder, and now we're talking about how high you can go. It's amazing what 1 year will do. I think Aaron Judge is the interesting one. Obviously, first full season, 155 games, almost 680 plate appearances, hits the 52 homers, has the almost 10 steals. He scored 128 runs, 114 RBI. His season kind of fluctuated a little bit, especially towards the end, which is a little bit of a concern. But he was able to bounce back a little bit. I'm wondering if we should be looking at him as the guy who, like JD Martinez, like Giancarlo Stanton, have the tremendous upside, have the power ability, hit in the middle of really good lineups. But, it's hard to say, but the health questions, haven't been there with him yet. So maybe he's the guy we should be taking over the other two.
I I'm not confident in what we'll see uh, from Aaron Judge. I'm really not. I've got my concerns just simply around the fact that he had such a slump in the second half of the season.
Hmm.
I think he's going to be good, but can he be good enough is the key question. And he kind of so that Trout is in a tier of his own all for me. Then you've got the next five down to Mookie Betts and JD Martinez. Then you've got a tier of Aaron Judge, George Springer, Cody Bellinger, and if you play on Yahoo, Chris Bryant and Nelson Cruz sit in that tier as well. But that's a real tier for me, which you're right. All three of those guys could challenge Mike Trout for the top outfielder in baseball, like 100%. If Judge, Springer, and Bellinger do what they're supposed to do, they could. Interestingly, I'm looking at ESPN's average draft position, and they don't have Bellinger listed on their outfield average draft position, but he is definitely outfield eligible in ESPN, which I find a little bit odd. But they are three guys that I think have real upside, and Aaron Judge leads that. He's the guy I've ranked the highest. I like what he can do. Again, I think it's that 50 home run upside that he offers that puts him out over George Springer for me.
So when you're drafting, especially early, do you tend to, I guess, do you want to shoot for the upside? Do you want to find a little more safety early and then gamble as you go through the draft? Like, what's kind of your general philosophy when it comes to drafting?
I think if I'm chasing power at the beginning of if I decide to go power at the start of my draft, I'm gonna go massive power. I'm gonna go Judge, Stanton, that kind of thing. That's what I'm gonna be looking at. But I do look for a bit of balance. I look to try and work it slowly. As of yet, I've only been in a keeper league and a 20 team league. So I haven't really been able to test out kind of a standard 10, 12 team league thing too much other than in mock drafts. And in mock drafts, I always try a little bit of everything. And what I've generally found is that if I pick at the first half of the round, I'm going to be looking to go for like an Altuve kind of guy, a guy that offers me a bit more balance because I like being able to then make my decisions in rounds 3, 4, 5. I like to have that freedom so that if, say, let's say Mookie Betts drops a little bit, I like to have the ability to go and grab Mookie Betts without feeling like I've all of a sudden absolutely stuffed myself at a particular category. And the trouble is, if you go heavy on steals at the start of the draft, then you're going to find that taking Mookie Betts means I'm short on power kind of situation. And so
Yeah.
that's that. I'm looking for balance early on in my drafts. I'm looking to set my team up with the best base possible so that as I get later and later, I can go after both sides. So let's say a guy we'll probably talk about later, Cameron Maybin, is available late on. I know that I can go and grab Cameron Maybin because he's going to give me those extra steals. And I know that next round I can go and chase a hitter who's going to give me 15, 20 home runs. So it just gives that flexibility. It means I'm not chasing anything. It's a nice kind of strategy to start with. It's kind of it can get messy. I know me and Damien spoke about that with the Francisco Lindor thing in shortstop, where it can get messy if you're not careful, where you can end up with so middle ground at everything that you're not achieving anything. But so bringing it around and summarizing it, if I'm going for power, I'm looking for massive upside. So I'm looking at the Judges kind of guy in the back end of the second round. But generally, I'm looking for balanced guys with decent average. You can find power, you can find steals late in drafts relatively, but what you cannot find is good average.
The next guy I want to hit on is George Springer, who's a little bit higher than I would probably be comfortable taking him, but at the same time, he's a guy that's improved his strikeout rate. His power numbers have gone up. 2015 he had 450 at bats and 16 home runs. So if you do that over, you know, 700 plate appearances, he's on pace for his close to 30 bombs, 100 RBIs. A really good lineup. Not going to steal as many bases, I think. Would you agree with that? You think he's kind of becoming more of a power guy and a little bit less of a guy who runs and gets you steals?
I think as we're seeing the Astros get better, they're not running him as often because he's not, I guess, a surefire steals kind of guy. Like, they're not going to feel confident every time they send him on the base paths. And I mean, 2016, he actually, if you look at the numbers, he had 20 attempts in 2015 and he was 16, so he succeeded on 80% of those. Last year he had 19 and he succeeded on less than 50%. Sorry, in 2016. So I can see why they're so hesitant all of a sudden. And last year he was caught stealing 7 times to 5 successful stolen bases. So I think they're going to be pretty hesitant to send him, because with that lineup, why would you risk him running into an out? What are you gaining for the guys behind him? So I think you're right. I think, again, you're looking at middle-ish, let's say 30, maybe 35 upside power. And it'll be interesting to see what the average does. If the average hangs around 280, then 100% the 27th overall pick is pretty good value for him when you consider where Judge is going at 17. Then I think that's great value for him. But if his average drops back down into that 260 region like we saw in 2016, then what you're going to see is real issues in terms of it's going to feel like he's letting you down more often than he's succeeding.
Yeah, and that's going to be the frustrating part, I think, because this is a guy who hangs out in the mid-20s to almost 30% of the strikeout rate, and it's obviously, players get better, they improve, they work, they cut down that strikeout rate. His isolated power went up, which is impressive, and but his BABIP was down a little bit. So maybe if BABIP goes up a little bit, maybe his K rate goes up a little bit, maybe it kind of balances out, and he can be in that 275, 280, which is fine. But yeah, like you said, if he drops to 260, then you're not quite as comfortable, and he's not going to have quite as many counting stats, and might be a little frustrating to own, but feels about the right range. Let's talk about a couple Brewers. Christian Yelich and Lorenzo Cain both found homes inside the top 20. Yelich is the guy finishes up the top 10. Do you think both those guys are kind of in the right spot?
No, I'd have them much closer together. I was actually having this discussion with someone on Twitter today about how I'd probably almost rather at his value have Cain. I mean, Cain's going the 85th pick off the board compared to Yelich going the 44th. Cain was my first hitter I took in my 20-team league because I just like that balance he gives you. I agree, if you're looking more long term, let's say you're drafting for a keeper or a dynasty league, Yelich is absolutely the way to go. 23, you got room to grow. But we've never seen Lorenzo Cain in a powerful lineup with a good hitting park like for him to be in. So I absolutely think he's going to be a good value. I have them ranked back to back at 15 and 16 in my fourth tier, so just below the Judge, Springer, and Bellinger tier. When I say 15 and 16, that includes Cruz and Chris Bryant. So you're talking even higher than that. I would absolutely be ecstatic with either of them as my number two, but Yelich's price is probably going to be too high for me. If Yelich starts to slip in drafts, I'll get more of him. But at the moment, I think Lorenzo Cain is the man to go for. Just to compare the two with my projections, you're talking 20 home runs for Yelich to 15 for Cain, but you're talking 25 steals for Cain to 15 for Yelich. You're talking a pretty similar average. And a slightly better balance of runs and RBI for Cain compared to Yelich, just seeing as it appears that Yelich is going to be the leadoff hitter and Cain is going to be the number two. But I love both of them with the potential for Travis Shaw, Ryan Braun, perhaps even Eric Thames, and maybe Domingo Santana. If they can get it worked out, I like what they're going to be hitting in front of, and I like the fact that they could come up on base with Orlando Arcia and Jonathan VR causing chaos on the base paths, and I'm really looking forward to watching the Brewers this year. I'm going to watch a hell of a lot of them, and I'm going to have a lot of them on my fantasy team.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess if I told you one of these guys is going 2020, who would you assume that I'm talking about?
I'm going to say Lorenzo Cain. I think it's easier for him to gain the 5 home runs than it is for Yelich to gain the 5 steals.
I'm totally agreeing with you. And playing in that ballpark, I think, is going to be a boost. Plus, he gets to play in Cincinnati a bunch this year. And, goes to Chicago and plays the Cubs on a windy day. All of a sudden, he can get it 4 or 5 extra home runs. And all of a sudden, he's 20 and he's got 20, 25 steals. He's hit. I trust his average a little bit better. I'm with you. Like, give me Lorenzo Cain all day.
100%.
100%. Let's talk about Christian Yelich's former teammate, Marcel Ozuna, who also finds himself flirting with the top 10 at outfield. I know this is a guy that you've been on. I traded him to you in a keeper league and have been regretting it every day since. Talk to me about Ozuna and kind of making the switch from Miami to St. Louis. What are your expectations?
First of all, I can't thank you enough for I think Marcel Ozuna costing me a 25th or 20, maybe at worst a 21st round pick this year. I can't thank you enough for that. That was just such a delightful trade of you to
No
give me.
problem. No problem.
Um, I do have a few concerns with Marcel Ozuna. Just simply, I've got him near a 20th or 18th, 19th in my rankings kind of thing. Whereas he's going again up with Yelich. Again, he's going to suffer from, for me, he's going to suffer from the high draft price you're going to have to pay for him. I'm probably not going to draft him in many redraft leagues this year. I think he can do 20 to 30 home runs, somewhere in that range. 25 is what my projections are checking out. And a 280 average. I think we'll see a more well-rounded guy this year. I think we'll see a guy who is balanced in what he does. It's going to be really tough. It's not as if he's going to a surefire great hitting park. The Cardinals lineup is not what it once was, and I feel like there's a lot of overrated people in St. Louis, and I think it's because the Cardinals in general, their reputation lifts them up more than they probably should be, and I think that's what's happening with Ozuna.
Well, and I'm looking at his numbers and like basically set personal records at every single stat last year. Like this is a guy that hits 20 homers with like 160-ish in terms of runs and RBIs. Hits more like 260. Not and last year he hit over 300. He hit almost 40 bombs. He had 124 RBIs, 93 runs scored. Like all these numbers are massive jumps from anything he's ever done. And I think if you're drafting him thinking you're going to get 35 and 100 and a guy who's going to approach, hit over 300, like I just don't know if that's going to be the guy you should expect. I think you should expect 25 home runs. Maybe he hits like 90 RBI because he's in a little bit better of a lineup. Maybe it's 170, 180, in terms of runs and RBIs. And then a guy that probably hits 275, 280. What are you projecting him in terms of average?
280, pretty much dead on. I'm talking 70 to 75 runs and 90 to 100 RBIs, but there's probably a little bit of room for growth on that. You can probably get closer to 90, 100 or 90, 90 kind of thing, depending on where he bats every day. I tend to look at it as a combined function of about 160 to 180, just so that because he'll fluctuate in the lineup depending on who's around him on a day-to-day basis, but he's solid. He's just not that exciting for me.
Yeah, like he's probably closer to like Cespedes, Chris Davis, those kind of guys than he is to like the top group, right?
Yeah, I think so. I've got him, like I say, behind Benintendi. So I'm a little bit low on Benintendi. I know we're going to get to him in a minute. Mm-hmm. I've actually got him below Cespedes, and again, a guy we're going to get to in a minute. I've got him below Ryan Braun, and then you've got Cain, Yelich. I've got KH Chris Davis. I suppose we don't have to call him that anymore. He's the only Chris Davis in town now. And then I've got a couple of other names such as Justin Upton and Starling Marte, who I think can offer you more upside than he can offer.
So let's talk about a couple speedy outfielders, and Byron Buxton and Andrew Benintendi. I guess in terms of personal preference, which one do you like better?
I like Benintendi over Buxton. With Benintendi, I feel like we've seen if that makes sense. Whereas with Buxton, I still feel like we're a little bit short of that balance. So Benintendi's shown us that he can hit for a decent average while also giving us 20-20, whereas Buxton's shown us a little bit of speed, like a decent amount of speed, a little bit of pop, but the average is still sitting in that 250 region. So I'd rather have Benintendi, and I'm actually quite a lot lower on Buxton than sort of the consensus.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be with you. Like 30% strikeout rate. I know the speed is legit. I know he's a tremendous athlete. I love him as a player. I've had him in a lot of leagues where I drafted him really late and been just kind of keeping him. But I don't know. A guy that, like, I just feel like we're getting way too aggressive, and it might be a bit of, well, the last year I didn't have enough speed, so I need to make sure I lock it in. And if I'm not grabbing, one of the elite guys at the top, Buxton's kind of that next group, and I can lock in, hopefully 30 steals. And I don't know that you can lock that in. I mean, this is a guy that it's hit 209, 225, and 250 in his 3 seasons in the majors. And, if he's hitting 230 again and not getting on base and not being good for the Twins, I could see him sitting, and you could be really, really frustrated as a manager.
Yeah, I mean, his upside is he could be Lorenzo Cain in terms of he could be that kind of 20 to 30 steal guy with a 15 to 20 home runs kind of thing. But he's going to have to cut that strikeout rate, get the average up to 280, 290, and that's the bit I can't see going. So I can't for a second understand why he would be drafted ahead of Lorenzo Cain. I understand drafting for upside, but I've got him 12, 15 spots lower than Lorenzo Cain in my rankings.
Yeah, I can't. There's no way. Like, if you tell me that he hits 270, like, that's a huge jump from where this guy has been. So, I know he hit 250 last year, 253, and he 270 wouldn't be that big of a difference. But, for a guy that's hit, barely above the Mendoza line, that just feels really aggressive, and I don't know that he's definitely a guy that that would make that jump for me.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. It's not he's not a guy I'm overly positive
on. So who else in the top 25 is somebody that you're really itching to talk about or excited about this season?
So I like the ability of Justin Upton to have another solid season this year, just simply as much because of the lineup around him as anything else. Everyone's talking about this one good year he had, but my projections are based over a 3-year span, and I'm just pulling them up now. You're gonna have to apologise for all the typing in this podcast, but I can't have them all open. We're talking about a guy who's gone 26, 31, 35 home runs in the last 3 years, and I mean he's hit in the Padres ballpark, and he's hit in the Tigers ballpark, which is not a great power park, but decent for doubles and triples. And he also hit for time in Anaheim, which again is not a huge hitters park. So I don't think 30 home runs is unreasonable. We've seen 9, 10, and 14, 19, 10, and 14 steals. So I think again that 10 to 15 range. I feel like the average isn't going to be at 273, but I think projecting it at 240, which is what Steam, or 248, which is what Steam has done, is a bit negative. I would go somewhere in that sort of 260 kind of range, and exactly what my thing's turfed out. And where he's hitting in that lineup behind Trout, and in front of Pujols and Cole Calhoun and guys like that, I think there's every possibility he puts up 200 plus combined runs and RBI. I really like Justin Upton. He's currently being drafted at exactly where I think he should be, at 9th overall. I've got him at 9th overall if you take Cruz and Bryant out of my rankings. So you're pretty much where he should be. But I really like him. I feel like the conversation on him is that he was just lucky last year, and I think when you look at the numbers, that is not the case.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I've always been an Upton guy. I think the improvements kind of across the lineup are going to make a big difference. I think that team's going to be much, they almost made the playoffs last year. I think they'll be a lot more solid all year long, and I'm with you. I love Justin Upton. What are we doing with Starling Marte? This is a guy that obviously, when he's right, can hit 300, can steal 40 to 50 bases. Obviously, in only 339 plate appearances, had 21 steals, so right on line for if he hit 600 and something for 40, 50 steals. Are you comfortable just penciling him in, or do you worry about a repeat offense or struggles or something?
I think we've seen from these guys like Nelson Cruz that kind of once you're dinged once, you kind of learn your lesson, unless your name's Alex Rodriguez or Ryan Braun, who seem to be suspected of this every year. I think the trouble we've got is that he was 40, then he was 30 steals, then he was 30 steals, then he was 47, then he was 21, and I know it was half a season last year, but which Starling Marte is it going to be? Is it going to be the one that generates offense with his legs, or is it going to be the one that had 19 home runs and 30 stolen bases? And that's what makes it very hard with him, is that you can't just project in, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
he's currently being drafted 13th, and that's right about where I have him because all of these steals guys get a little bit of a bump, especially a steals guy that has the ability to hit 290. I mean, that's just what stands him out for me over Billy Hamilton by some distance in a roto league.
Would you rather have the 20 homers and 30 steals, or would you rather have maybe 7 to 10 homers with 40, 50 steals?
Probably, if I'm drafting him, I'm drafting hoping for the 40 plus steals.
Yeah, I think I'm with you because I think if you can pencil in 40 steals and the ability to get to maybe 50, and you can make up the power later with Justin Boers, Scott Schebler's, with whoever. So yeah, I'm totally with you. Ben, is there any guys that are on, as we kind of finish up the top 25, any guys that are right on that border for you that even though ADP says they're probably closer to 30 than they are 20, 25, that you feel like this guy is a top 25 outfielder and should be drafted as so?
So a guy I'm just looking where he falls is Reese Hoskins, who doesn't appear on the outfield ADP. I feel like he's been a little bit overvalued simply based on what we were talking about with Tommy Pham. But a guy I'm really high on this year, a lot of people are low on, but I haven't got him that much higher than ESPN's ADP, actually, which surprised me, is Ryan Braun. I've told you I'm high on Milwaukee's outfield, and actually after 3 of the back-to-back at 13, 14, and 15 in my rankings, right above Cespedes, Benintendi, and Ozuna, yeah. I think Ryan Braun, with the potential to switch to first base this year, which is where he seems to be going, has the potential to play that 135, 140 plus games. And if he does that, I think 20, 25, 30 home runs, and I still think he'll steal you 10 to 15 bases. I think he's going to be a really valuable guy. I expect to see the Ryan Braun, like we've seen Ryan Braun dip down to 260 and then come back to 280, 300. So I expect to see a 280, 290 hitter in Ryan Braun. I really think he can do good work. The only thing I'm concerned about is what level of steals you can project him for. I think 10 is kind of the floor of what I would expect, but 20 is the upside if he can prove he's healthy and they let him run. So he's a guy I definitely am targeting, and I see him drop a lot outside the top 100. And again, I started my 20-team league with I went 3 pitchers and then I went Lorenzo, Cain, Ryan, Braun to back it up. So that you can see what my belief is in what Milwaukee are going to do this year. And I think if Ryan Braun's hitting well and he learns how to play first base, there's no way Eric Thames gets a look in at first base if Domingo Santana and Ryan Braun are playing well.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing. Obviously, we have 4 Brewers outfielders inside the top 25. I mean, that's pretty insane. And the way that people are drafting Domingo Santana, and you have to assume that Santana plays in the outfield every day and that Ryan Braun will be your first baseman at least a majority of the time. Obviously, they'll find days to give guys a break and maybe Braun plays the outfield a little bit, but the way we're drafting, we have to assume that Braun's going to be an everyday first baseman. Santana's going to be playing in the outfield every day. I don't know. The fact that we're expecting all 4 of these guys to be in the top 25 is kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, somebody's going to be disappointing. And at the moment, I'm banking on it being Santana. I just think that he's the one with the most recent history of failure, because we've been talking about him as a prospect for a few years for the Brewers. And it feels like last year was the first year he really showed it. I mean, he jumped from 11 home runs in half the season to 30 full season. All of a sudden, he stole 15 bases, and his strikeout rate was still 30%, and somehow his average managed to jump to 280. I don't see it. I think we're going to struggle to see the value we need out of him and the playing time we need out of him. I think if him and Ryan Braun play exactly the same amount of games this year, be it 110, 120, or 140, Ryan Braun is the man that I still want out of the 2 of them.
Yeah, and we have to. Honestly, if you're drafting Braun or Santana this high, you have to assume they're going to get close to 600 plate appearances, if not over. But I'm with you. Santana isn't exactly the home run slam dunk, and I think it's really easy to get into. Well, this is what he did last year, so obviously it's what he's going to do this year, and that's just not the way it works. You have to kind of look back a few years and see what have they done. You know, if a player has one bad year, doesn't mean they're going to be bad forever. But yeah, a guy that strikes out 30% of the time. If he hits 20 home runs and has like, 10 steals and he's hitting 265 instead of 280, that's going to be disappointing. And for a guy that, you're taking near the top 25, top 100 player. I don't know. That feels rich for my blood. The guy I wanted to throw
I just
out.
want to finish. Oh,
Go
go
ahead.
on. I just wanted to throw out AJ Pollock quickly because he's an interesting guy to me. But the reason why, if I'm sat there right now, I'm thinking, well, why is he talking about the mixed talents of Cain, Benintendi, but he's talking about AJ Pollock, who has the ability to be that 20 home run, 25 steal guy. There's two reasons. One, I don't foresee him playing 140 games. He played 157 in 2015, but he played 75 in 2014. He managed 12 games in 2016 and 112 last year. I think 120 games is probably about his ceiling, which limits his upside. And then you add in on top the humidor and what that could bring. And if that just takes away some of the pop out of his bat, we see those home runs regress 2 or 3. All of a sudden, we're not talking about the same guy. And equally, you could say the same for Lorenzo Cain, but you're talking about a 30-year-old guy here who suffered injuries. I mean, Cain's got a much better injury history than Pollock. And I just wonder if at some point Arizona are going to say, right, what we want you to do is get on base and let Paul Goldschmidt drive you in. Stop taking risks.
Yeah, it is interesting, the Pollock thing. It seems like he finally got healthy, which is good. There was a couple years where it was one injury after another. Yeah, I don't know. I think 550, 600 plate appearances is definitely reasonable. I want to see him get that average back up to where it used to be. This was a guy in 2014, 2015 that hit 315, 330. Obviously, last year's 266 is frustrating, but if he can hit 280, 290 like he is projected on Fangraphs with a lot of the projections, and he's a guy that gets you 20 steals and maybe 10 or 15 home runs, like that could be a super valuable player.
Yeah, he's got the potential to be, but he's only had over 500 plate appearances once in his major league career. He's gone over 400 twice, and he's been under 300 twice. So you can see the averages you're looking at is probably about 400, and if he does 400, you're probably looking at 15 and 20, and if you take off a couple of home runs for the effect we think the humidor is going to have, you're probably talking 13, 20. So I just got a little bit of a worry about him, and that just deflates him below Lorenzo Cain. For me, again, he's being taken above Lorenzo Cain. Basically, I'm just going to draft Lorenzo Cain in every draft I do, apart from the one with you, because you'll probably take him before.
Well, I already kept him, so we don't have to worry about it. He's gonna be in my keeper, so it'll be nice. What about Yasiel Puig? Is he a guy that we should be talking about as closer to that top 25, or do you think he should be a guy that falls in the next group?
It's a tough one, that. I'm going to say right about the 30th kind of range, in that 25 to 30 range. I just think that at some point his personality will come to play, and I feel like he blows so hot and cold, and that's what concerns me. I like a bit more consistency, and he really doesn't offer that. It's like one day he'll be 2 weeks later he'll be striking out 5 times in a game. He just seems to have that kind of variability, and that kind of volatility is perhaps the right word. So I also worry a little bit that he's being projected this year for a 280 average. I mean, he hit 255 in 2015 and 263 the last 2 years. Where do people suddenly think he's going to hit 280?
Yeah, no, I think the 260, 270 range sounds a lot more realistic. But yeah, I don't know. I want to see if he can get close to 600 at bats in this lineup. He has obviously the power to hit 30 home runs. Gets you 10 to 15 steals. He's a guy that, over the past I've always banged the table and said he's terrible and don't draft him. Don't fall into this trap. And this year I feel like I'm on the opposite end. I feel like I'm a little more open to the idea of him being a valuable player and approaching, a top 20, 25 outfielder. But I guess we'll have to see. All right, Ben, this is fun. We got to run through a ton of names. at 60FT Podcast on Twitter. Let us know what you think. Obviously, you can see at Notorious KRO, at BenRolf15. Let us know who we should be higher on, who we should be lower on. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube feed or Google Play or iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you happen to get our show. We really appreciate the support. For Ben Rolfe, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.